by chance hear tractors, that would be because there's construction going on outside. And if the camera stability seems more precarious than usual, that would be because I can't find my tripod. Anyway, in March of this year, a little movie called The Lost City starring Sandra Bullock came out, and naturally I was seated opening week. It was alright. I definitely preferred the second act to the third or first, and I'd say I enjoyed it more as a comedy than a romance, but I did appreciate its sincerity. I suppose if this video were a review of The Lost City, it would end here, but what I actually want to talk about is its marketing appeal. I mean, it was promoted like any other movie with trailers and a press tour, but I think it would be a safe assumption to make that Paramount, the distributors, were banking on an audience desperate for a rom-com revival, a rom-com essence, if you will. The headlines quickly fixated on rom-coms being back from somewhere. Is The Lost City Sandra Bullock's send-off to her rom-com career? A modern, swashbuckling take on rom-coms. Sandra Bullock is still the rom-com queen, and The Lost City proves it. I remember the hype on my Twitter timeline, and the hype pulled through. With a majority female audience over 35, it overperformed at the box office. It became Sandra's 11th $100 million grosser and the first comedy or romance to reach that milestone since 2019, pre-COVID. Far and away, I think The Lost City is Hollywood's most successful attempt thus far at marketing a new rom-com around the novelty of its own existence. But it's not the only attempt as of late, nor will it be the last. I'm thinking mainly of J.Lo's Marry Me and Julia Roberts' Ticket to Paradise. In the 90s or 2000s, these films would have been drops in the bucket, but now they're epic throwbacks, farewells, or homecomings to the genre. Fans rejoice as Julia Roberts and George Clooney reunite for a classic rom-com, Marry Me and the revenge of the old-fashioned rom-com. Julia Roberts makes a glorious return to the rom-com with George Clooney. Jennifer Lopez and Owen Wilson revive the rom-com formula. It's yet to be seen how successful Ticket to Paradise will be, though I do have high hopes for it, and Marry Me fell just short of breaking even at the box office, but it is the reigning most streamed day and date movie on Peacock. So how did we wind up in a rom-com landscape so barren that new releases are resurrections? And if a rom-com renaissance is afoot, will new genre-defining actors, writers, and directors emerge, or are studios unwilling to take that risk? Where does streaming fit into all of this? These are the questions I'd not like to answer, but briefly explore today. After I thank Vessi for sponsoring this video, of course. Vessi is a shoe company, and I was so excited when they reached out to me because I'd been in the market for a good pair of strolling shoes. For a future video, I'm working my way through every Nicholas Sparks audiobook, and to set the scene, I like to walk loops around local lakes. Sometimes I feed the ducks, peas, not bread. Bread is bad for them. Anyway, my onyx black everyday moves are perfect for pond dwelling because they're 100% waterproof, as are all of Vessi's many styles. They don't particularly feel like they could be waterproof, but don't worry, I tested out the technology at a splash pad and my socks made it out dry. I guess the knit material they're made out of is called Dymatex, and it's also meant to keep you cool in warm weather and warm in cool weather. Moves make ideal activewear, but I also picked out a pair of weekend Chelseas more so for style. They're honestly just as comfortable though, so I'm thinking these are going to be my go-to concert shoes. I highly recommend checking out Vessi's website by clicking the link in my description. You'll get $25 off your very own pair when you use my code. Alright, I think our first order of business is, of course, defining romantic comedies, because the label is more tricky than one might assume. Pretty frequently, I've seen them described as equal parts comedy and romance, but I prefer to think of romance as the genre and comedy as the tone. By that, I mean the broad strokes of a true rom-com's plot wouldn't change if you imagined it being dramatic instead of comedic, but the whole thing would completely fall apart if you cut out the kissing. A neat trick is checking out the poster. Is the love story front and center? That's a rom-com. Is the love interest nowhere to be seen? That's a comedy with a romantic subplot. This isn't a foolproof system, like Hitch is decidedly a rom-com, Juno is debatable, but I do trust my judgment overall. My definition does, however, leave room for interpretation. I mean, I opened this video talking about The Lost City, but Sandra's gone on record to say that she doesn't think it would be called a rom-com if it weren't female-led. If the roles were reversed, if it had been Channing in my role and me in his role, they wouldn't be calling it a rom-com adventure. They'd be calling it Indiana Jones. Honestly, I disagree with her. I think there are some pretty legitimate reasons to categorize these two particular titles differently. Indiana Jones, while not humorless, isn't a comedy series, and while it features romantic subplots, Bond girls never had me considering their movies romances either. The Lost City is multi-genre, but it very intentionally frames itself as a romantic comedy first. In many ways, it's a tribute to trashy romance novels. From a bird's eye view, though, Miss Bullock has a broader point. Female-led comedies like Legally Blonde or Bridesmaids are notoriously more likely to be lumped together with rom-coms than their male-led counterparts, simply by virtue of being for girls, aka chick flicks. On that note, my first theory as to why the rom-com genre is in a state of flux is because it's been historically reliant on gender roles which become less relevant every day. The significance of The Lost City being propelled into success specifically by women over 35 isn't lost on me, and it makes perfect sense. Popular opinion's pendulum seems to swing back and forth between considering the romance market uniquely feminist or anti-feminist. After all, it's both true that there's no other genre more often made by and for women, and that the heteronormative patriarchal values it tends to espouse come back to bite us. You know, in 2018, Fandango surveyed over 3,000 women and found only 1 in 10 of them preferred romance movies to action movies. And I'd wager the majority of you are a part of that 1 in 10, but we can't attribute the entire discrepancy to internalized misogyny. It's fair to say that for a long time, wish fulfillment is what drew women to rom-coms, and over time, female protagonists who wanted for nothing more than a boyfriend became less relatable. That being said, there's clearly still an audience for the genre, even if it's one that needs to be appealed to in a less tired way. I see tweets all the time asking for a rom-com-assance, claiming we're already in one, or naming actors who'd be down for one. When romantic comedies do see theaters, they're not flopping, particularly when they're representative of diverse demographics. So I don't think we can blame our ever-progressing sensibilities as an audience for the drought. After reading up on what proper critics and people from the industry have had to say about it, I'm convinced we can blame Marvel almost exclusively. I'm serious. There's a real emphasis in the discourse on superhero movies being all studios want right now. Insider made a whole graph about it, but I do think we can apply the same logic to most franchises, spin-offs, or reboots, which I'm sure you're well aware are extremely overprevalent right now. Come to think of it, I'm not sure comedy of the romantic variety has fallen by the wayside much worse than loveless comedy. Studios are focused on low-risk, high-reward projects, blockbusters basically, which has resulted in the near extinction of what they call mid-budget movies. Apparently, that's the sweet spot where comedies used to live. Now they live on streaming services, which I've rather intentionally failed to delve into this far. That would be because when you take the original content of streaming services into account, I think there's a strong argument to be made that rom-coms are alive and well. Rom-com-assance? Been there, done that. They've been putting them out. Some of them suck, some of them don't. Some aim for something higher, and others are comfortably mid. But is that not the way of all genres? When we say they don't make rom-coms anymore, I think what we often mean is they don't make rom-coms like they used to. Tell me the big Hollywood romantic comedy is dead and I'll believe you. That's substantially true. I've seen the Insider graph, but it only accounts for major studio-wide releases. releases. It's not unreasonable to miss those, don't get me wrong. I simply wonder if the landscape has changed too much to ever go back in earnest. That's why I'm so fascinated by the new Bullock, Lopez, and Roberts entries, because it seems to me that they're genetically engineered to appeal to that desire. If they do signal a new trend, I think it's exclusively one where familiar faces return to the genre. I could easily see stars like Katherine Heigl, Drew Barrymore, or Queen Latifah coming out with rom-coms soon, and believe you me, I'll welcome them with open arms. This is an exciting time. I don't, however, foresee these throwbacks revitalizing romantic comedies in the sense that new talent gains foothold theatrically. For me, modern genre regulars are what's missing from the streaming rom-com-a-sance. Recently, we saw Lana Condor in another one, so I'm hoping this means she's found her niche. That's what I'm looking for. Repeat offenders. Some requests. Thomas Doherty. I wholeheartedly believe he's had chemistry with everyone he's ever met. Zoe Deutsch. If you're adapting a contemporary romance novel, there's like a 50% chance its protagonist is the exact character she played in Set It Up. Justice Smith. He has the range. If these people, or anyone else, Noah Centineo and Emma Roberts have probably come the closest, develop a catalog of streaming rom-coms, then I'll be close to satisfied. Though I do wish all of them were day-and-date releases for those of us who like movie theaters. You know what, I do see potential for a Crazy Rich Asians cinematic universe, so maybe that's how we'll get with the times. Ultimately, I don't think I'm equipped to say what Marry Me, Ticket to Paradise, and The Lost City mean for the industry, but I did want to pose the question. I know this was a shorter one, but my last scripted video was the Bridgerton one, and I wanted to do something more hinged as opposed to unhinged. You get it.